So welcome, guys. I'm so happy to have you. I'm Natalie Kalbach. I'm the host of Spill Your Heart. If you haven't been with us yet, I'm super excited to have my friend Karen here, and I will introduce her shortly and talk about our theme today, which is beginner's mind. And that's a really cool topic, and I think we will get out a lot of that. Speaking of some stuff that's coming up from Natalie's studio, if you haven't seen it yet, Birgit Kopson, Marsha Falk, and I have done it again. We did a new workshop. It's called Beyond the Paper. It's an art journaling workshop. And it's called Beyond the Paper because we're using anything but paper. So it was a total new concept for us as well. It's going to be super fun. And speaking of doing something new, not only was that like really mind-breaking for us, we were like, oh boy, we usually only work on paper. Let's do all kinds of stuff. Like we did fabric and we have plaster and Durala. You will see, it's amazing. And one of the new things that we did, or that I did, we actually created a stamp, a foam stamp for the workshop together. So it was a collaboration where the three of us created a stamp set together, which I've never done before. None of them have ever done that before. We created our own stuff, but never, had to work with someone else to make this work. So it's super fun. It's a hexagon foam stamp, and each of us created two parts of the stamp. So that's cool. But if you have any questions about Beyond the paper workshop, which Kim is putting in the chat, the link to, we are having a webinar on April 1st, where we will talk about the workshop and answer your questions if you're like, I don't know yet if I want to sign up, or what is it about? What about the supplies, yada, yada. We will tell you about it. So that's one thing I wanted to tell you. And then I have another webinar. It's actually not a webinar. It's a Zoomcast with my friend Sarah Matthews coming up in April as well. Kim's going to put that in, and we are challenging each other in April, and we're talking about challenges, show you our challenge, and talk a little bit about why challenges are fun. And that, without further ado, I'm gonna go and say, hi, Karen, so wonderful to see you. So for those of you who don't know Karen Auld is a coach, motivational speaker. Here comes my like really bad English. Like, what is she? No, I'm kidding. And she's also a writer and a very, very long and very dear friend of mine. She's not only a motivational speaker, she's also a very motivational friend. And some of you know her from Creative Jumpstart, where we had talked about the inner critic. Hey, Karen, how are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm so excited. That workshop sounds amazing. And I mean, what a cool thing that you guys are doing to embrace the beginner's mindset. My goodness. Like that's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah, we want to talk about the beginner's mindset, and I'm sure that, I was thinking about that when Karen and I were discussing about this topic, and I'm sure other people had that too, and Karen has a question for you, but it was like, there's so much things that and I'm sure many of us have done that we have never done before. For example, in the last year during the pandemic, I had never hosted a webinar, right? And Karen was actually the one who said, hey, let's do a webinar for Creative Jumpstart. Then we whipped out a couple more, and now I'm doing it regularly with other people. So, and mind you, I'm still like super nervous every time before it starts, because I'm like, this is live and there can go things wrong and technology. But you know what? You're like, we figure it out. We will talk a little bit more about that too. I'm baking bread. I'm sure some other people have done that now too. We will find out in the chat maybe. I started, I pulled out my sewing machine, which I hadn't had
Nice.
used in a long time. Actually, never. It was brand new, and I had it standing there, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe I should make my own masks, and and for other people. So I started making masks, and I had to figure out that stupid sewing machine. I conquered. So yeah, what did you do new during this past year, Karen?
Oh, for me, I mean, definitely I had the pantry adventures like everyone else, and in the chat, for those of you who are here with us, tell us like what new thing did you do during the pandemic? Because like we all, I think, during the pandemic started, tried something, right? But for me, yeah, it was a lot of just being, creative with what was at home. So even just things like, you know, um, I didn't have like I remember I ran out of paper towels, and I was like, okay, but I always had these like rags because I do environmental work, so I always had like things that were more sustainable, but I would just grab the paper towels, right? So just like little things like that, I was like using things around the house and saying like, ooh, like, well, what could I do with this or what could I do with that? Definitely like new to just this, all of this, all of this online stuff. Nat and I are used to, like, we usually communicate with people, belly to belly, right? And that just wasn't happening. So a lot of teaching online has been, it's been interesting. So let's see, what do people say in the chat here? Oh, I see watercolor.
Bread baking.
Yeah.
Um, Lisa says workshop with New York artist, and I'm in California. That's amazing, right? The ability to Sarah says started mixed media, crochet,
Oh, yeah.
container gardening. That's cool. Lots of people did more gardening, right?
Yeah.
Becky says watched lots of YouTube art videos.
Nice.
Jan says knitting, lots of gardening, lots of art making. I started learning how to speak Czech. That's amazing. Wow. Learning the Dulcimer. I don't know what that is, Julie. Don't kill me. It's maybe a word that I don't know, and I probably said it wrong too. So I have to look it up. Chop down trees and split wood for winter fires. Yeah. Sharon said she moved. Wow, Sharon, that's a tough one. Making a house planter fairy garden. Oh, it's a musical instrument. Dulcimer, if it's said right, it's an instrument, a musical
Oh,
instrument.
like, yeah, 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 yeah. I know. Yeah, okay.
I have to look it
Cool.
up. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And like,
Dulcimer.
so, yeah. I think what happened, like, so like when the pandemic hit, we were all forced to into something new. And so we had this beginner's mindset. We went right to there because we never had this experience. So we had to start thinking, differently. So that's why you saw those people baking bread. You saw all those people saying, oh my gosh, I never planted anything before, but I'm stuck here in my backyard and I'm going to try to grow something. But that's because we were pushed into this part in time. We opened up to this beginners, but we were forced out of our busyness. And that's really what, like, today I wanted to talk about with your folks, was this whole idea of what's called Shoshin, which is the Zen Buddhist idea of the beginner's mindset. So there
Yeah,
was
what is that, Karen? What does that mean? Why is it a principle?
yeah, so there's a guy named Shunryu Suzuki wrote a book in the 60s, called the Zen mind, the beginner's mind. And really, the Zen mind is all about being open, right? And but what he was saying was that the openness brings you back to thinking like a beginner,
Mhm.
thinking that, being open. And the big thing is like letting go of the preconceptions. So like especially in art, and like what we learned during the webinar with Creative Jumpstart, and like the comments that we got from people was that where their inner critic that starts saying like, oh, you don't know how to do that, or it remembers the last time I tried watercolor, everything blended and it looked crappy, so that preconception goes back. So the beginner's mind is saying, we got to let go of that. We've got to like we have to stop and have fresh eyes. And that's really what the principle is to bring that, because like what does you think of Zen Buddhism, what do you think about? You think of meditation, you think of ohms and stuff, right? but that's what it is. It's making you pause. That's really what it is, right? So we're pausing, and we're bringing in that openness, those new set of eyes. But I think like we all, I mean, it's just something we all do, and especially like in art, I think, a lot of times you learn to do something a certain way, and then that's the way, and you get good at it,
Mm.
right? And then you say, okay, great, like I can do this. And then you may just, your art may get a little stale, or you may just not want to, you may not create your art might not grow and evolve because you feel like you have to do this way. And
Yeah, I
again,
think like for speaking of, I assume there's a large group of our people that are mixed media artists or artists. I think like one part why people love mixed media, and that's me too, it's not only because we like shopping for new art materials. I think because we like to try new things out.
yeah.
And like I'm like the first one who jumps on the bandwagon if there is a new art tool out there, or art material, art like paint media. I will buy it, and I love to dive in and try it with everything that I've tried before. Like, I buy something and I'm gonna go, okay, how does this react to something that I know already?
Mm-hmm.
Like for the workshop, for example, I think the beyond the paper workshop, we were like, okay, I know how acrylic paint reacts to paper, but what's going to happen if I use it with a different substrate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there was a lot of really bad things that you might not see in the workshop, but I think it's important to talk about it because we always see only the good results, right?
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
a big problem, right?
Yep. Yep. And especially like, gosh, you know, with social media and Instagram, and just even like the people that we hail in the media, as overnight successes, where that that's not the case, right? So that we get that mindset in our head that like, oh my gosh, like I could never do that. But you don't realize that that person tried and tried and tried, and then they found the creation because they kept going back to that beginner's mindset. They kept going back to, okay, I need to look at this differently because I didn't like the results that I got. So instead of just saying, you know, like I stink, right? You say, oh, like, okay, what did I learn and what can I do differently? Like, and like, as we were, preparing for this, like Natalie and I were chatting about how like her and I just were born with a sense of curiosity and and just wanting to do different things. And really, I mean, like, you think, just look at your path, Natalie. I mean, if you didn't have that beginner's mindset, you would still be a paralegal, right? I mean, yeah, you would be, which is amazing when you think about it. But that's what happens, like, we get stuck sometimes
Mm.
because we get to, like, this is how something should be.
Yeah, it
And
should be, but also I think there's a fear of unknown.
oh,
I
sure,
mean,
yeah,
I mean, I'm of course, this is a wide field, not just art, but I think the fear of trying something new or change
yeah,
has a lot to do with the unknown. And I think we were talking about that. We were trying to figure out uh, what it is for both of us that we kind of like, I mean, you changed careers too.
mhm,
And that was a huge step. And I think you told me back then there were people that said you're crazy doing this. Why are you leaving a very well paid safe job where you could retire with and do this now? And what was your answer? What did you say to those people? Like what, like,
I really, for me, it was just like, I just knew I had to try it. Like, I had to give it a shot, you know. And the funny thing with me is, right now, the I was doing some corporate work and they offered me a job again, and I said yes, and people thought I was crazy about that too, but I was just like, no, like this is, you have to have that. But again, if I didn't have that beginner's mindset and say, okay, I'm gonna try something new, I'm gonna, this feels good. I think the other thing too is, I'm okay with saying, this didn't work out,
yes,
you know. I
exactly.
Yeah, like, okay, like, all right, if I don't like this, I'll change, and a lot of people think, like, I talked to so many people who said, like, I went to school for accounting, I hate accounting. And I'm like, so you're still an accountant? And they're like, yes, and they just feel like it'll be such a failure if they say this didn't work out.
Yeah,
But
and I
sometimes
think
it
there's a
does.
there I think that for me it's very important to see um where you try to change your mind about that. Like, say a job is a really, really big topic and there's a lot of stuff that hangs with it. Let me put my
Right,
hands a little bit more. No, I mean, like, you have there's maybe, people are dependent on you, you have a mortgage, you have, kids, etc. So that's a whole big like big thing. But let's
yeah,
say if you're like about trying something new in your art or
yep,
in a hobby,
yeah,
right? What's the worst thing that can happen?
right, yeah,
Like, you try it, right? There's yeah, maybe you have to invest a little bit in, the materials or something, but what's the worst thing that can happen?
right,
And I think it's this, we have this perfect picture
yeah,
in our mind. There's the saying which I use in class a lot, like, you have to let go of the perfect picture in your head because it screws you up. uh, I'm sure that quote is wrong, but um, but what I mean with it, if you're like going with this preconception of how something should look like when you're doing something with your hands and you haven't done it 100 million times, right? You haven't actually put the time in to try how it will look like, then you're really setting yourself up to, when it doesn't work out that way, to say, yeah, see, that didn't work. And I
right.
think one of the things that is great is if you're able to. I'm having trouble hearing you. Okay, that's great that she has trouble hearing me. Sorry about that, guys. What is great is when you're able to go with the flow, like you have a kind of a plan, but if it doesn't work out, you say, okay, and what now? Can
Yeah,
I work with what I got as a result right now? or do I have to, paddle back and try it a different way?
Yeah.
But how do we get ourselves to this? I mean, this is easier said than done. How do we do that, Karen? Come
Yeah.
on, Karen, tell us.
Well, it's, you know, I think the biggest thing is just being conscious, that's number one. When we're aware of what's going on, between here, we understand that, we're having these preconceptions, we're judging ourselves, we're judging, even we're judging other people's art. We're saying like, either you're saying, oh, I'll never be able to do that, or you're saying, oh, I don't like that technique, I wouldn't do it that way. So you could be on either side of that spectrum when you're creating, and that can be a problem, right? Like, especially like if you want to try something new and you're an expert. So like, let's say, you know you're an expert in mixed media and you want to try watercolor, right? What happens is, as an expert, you may see somebody else doing something, and what they found with this beginner's mindset is that an expert doesn't seek really to new knowledge, they seek validation
Good
to
point.
what they know, right? So you have to, again, just be aware of, oh, I'm doing that. And that's when we can then let the that beginner's mind flourish. I mean, like think about like when a little kid, like if you ever read a book, especially like to a group of little kids, and like they're listening, they're hanging on every single word, they're so excited. That's the excitement. We lose that a lot as we age and as we learn, and as we start having all of this judgment, within ourselves. Like, so even like you were saying, like buying some new supplies, like you may say like, oh, well, the last time I bought, last time I invested $40 in something, I hated it. So then you question, well, should, that experience is going to be this experience. And that's not the case. You don't know if that's going to be true. So you're putting that judgment onto, what you're doing. And then you're losing that beginner mind. And I think as creative people, we all know that beginner mind is where you want to be. That's where creation, really happens, when
Yep.
you're, I mean, like your workshop that you're doing, I mean, like you guys had to say, like, I'm sure one of you emailed the other one and said, this might be crazy, but what if we did an art journal and it's not on paper,
Oh
and
yeah, and we also send ourselves, like we have a WhatsApp group, right? So we would be like, okay, I'm gonna try this now, and then like half a day later, you're like,
oops.
wait, geez, can I show you this? And I think what's so great about trying something new though is that besides the workshop, for example, and I'm sorry, this is like a shameless plug in the workshop, but I'm just using it. I can use something else. Let's
It was
say I'm
perfect
baking.
timing, though. It really was. Like, we didn't plan this. We seriously didn't.
But what I think is, when you try something, again, you're thinking about, when you learn something new, you connect things to what you already know.
Absolutely.
I told Karen, for example, that, my husband, who went to high school with Karen, who she knows very well, since you were even in elementary school. So you guys are going a long way back. But
Yeah.
anyway, he studied music and he's very much into music. He's very much into jazz music, which I can tolerate to a certain point, right? If it's not too crazy, I'm like, okay, there's a melody, I get the melody, I'm in. So one time he was like, let's watch Ken Burns, something about jazz. And I was like, oh, brother, this means like 500 hours of something about a topic that's like really not my thing. But then I was like, okay, let's look at it with new eyes. You like Ken Burns, you actually like all these like history things, and let's look at it. And while we were watching it, I couldn't stop thinking about connections to what I do in my art,
Mm-hmm.
how people were like discovering new music and take it further and further. And I would be thinking about like, oh wow, it was so interesting. Like if you think about a jam session, it's like, they have to listen to each other. And that's like, I made this connection to when you're playing on your canvas. And I took a lot out of it actually as ideas and thought about it. And I think
Yeah.
like this is a small sample of doing some, it's not really new, but I opened myself up to learn something new about jazz.
Yep.
And, am I now a bigger jazz fan? Maybe not, but I can like cherish it or, embrace it more.
Yeah.
But it made me learn new things that I connected somehow to something that I did. And I use a lot of quotes from the Ken Burns, episodes that made me really think deep about art, and I made these connections.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And that's like, you know, and again, like you could have gone in there and like I'm sure you took a breath and you said, all right, I'm just gonna see, right? But that's exactly what Zen Buddhism talks about, right? Like, so you took a pause and said, I'm going to sit here and see what happens, and all of these good juicy things, came, and now you have quotes you can use in your stuff, and that's, but there's so many people who would just say, I don't like jazz. Nope, not I don't like jazz. And that closes you to all of these opportunities. So when it's that pause is just so important, to give yourself that space, and to ask questions. That's another, if you find yourself that you're judging, that you're not in the beginner's mindset, just to ask questions, and to wonder, so you said, well, you know what, maybe I will like this, maybe there's something here for me. And we the whole, like, adulting term, we feel sometimes that we can't wonder, that we can't explore, and it's okay to, just say, like, I don't know, like, I don't know anything about this, and admit that,
right.
number one, and then say, okay, so I'm just gonna sit back and absorb this, see what I get from it. But we get to this point where we do close down, or we have these notions, of preconception. And we, again, just have to be very aware of that, and, understand when our mind goes there.
Mm,
Like, I know for me, if I don't get enough sleep and if I don't eat, that's when my inner critic and my brain will just, you know, like, I can't create in that space, because it goes to all of the judgy thoughts, and we're just in that judgment standpoint. It's just really hard to create. You know, I was it was I was remembering when I was getting ready for this. Um, so John Mellencamp, the singer, right? So when he did the Scarecrow album, so that was like in like 85-ish, I think.
mm,
And that was like huge, huge album for him. He said to all his musicians, he's like, look, we're going to go back in the studio in about, a year, 8 months. I want everyone to go learn another instrument. And Scarecrow was so like he could have rinsed and repeated Scarecrow, right? Like, everybody loved it so much. But he said, no, I want to do something totally different. And I want you guys to go, like, if you're going to be in the band, you got to go learn a new instrument. And I just thought that was so cool. But
yeah.
how, and like the pandemic forced us to try something new. So he forced his band to try something new. And we need to just do that for ourselves at times. We need to, we need to grow and we need to evolve. And, when we lose that beginner's mindset, that's when we get, rigid. And, sometimes you can just walk and you can see those, just people, can't people watch too much nowadays, but, I used to love to just people watch, especially in the airport. And, and I'd say like, that guy's rigid, that guy, that one, oh yeah, that one, like, because you can just tell just the way they, their body language, just the way they, are around other people, right?
Well, I think like for me, there's something about if I don't mix it up sometimes and I fail, then something's wrong. Like
Yeah.
I like I don't know. And I think back to what you said earlier, which I thought was very important. And then I want to look for a couple of the comments, but it was
Yeah.
that you said if you then you when you just do the whole time what you know, especially maybe in your hobbies and your creative stuff, and then you're looking for validation. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, it depends on what you're doing, right? But
Yep.
I thought that was interesting. That's a very good point. Let me see what people here say. Becky says she does not understand why people don't like learning new things. Yeah. Anne says, I think experiences in childhood are a big factor. Teachers, parents, siblings, and peers can squish creativity. I think that's a very, very good point. That's, I think, where that fear of trying new things actually can come from. And that was a point that I wanted to ask you. Thank you, Anne. That was great. I was asking you because I feel like for me, it's easier to learn something new that I've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to something that I've tried earlier and then something terrible happened, right? Then it's harder for me.
Yeah.
That if someone said to me, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Or I tried something, and let's say bread. I was always thinking that I'm not a person who can do anything with yeast. I am a horrible baker. That's what I would say to you. I probably still am, although I should just try. Here we go. But like everything that I think there's something about also the oven now and ingredients and stuff. And I'm also not a measure person, like whatever. But like yeast was the like, oh my God, worst thing. I don't know why. But I was also afraid about it because when I think back, my mother, when she would do yeast dough, she would always be like, be careful when you're around the oven. She would put it in the oven with the light on, and to have it rise.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love Sarah just said, and Brad senses fear. It makes me laugh. But like, I would be like, okay, very careful. And she would be like, don't push the oven door too hard. It's going to fall apart. So there was something in me that always thought, boy, that's really complicated. Then I tried something with yeast and it was an absolute disaster. And so I had a real hard time to get over this, like, let's try bread baking.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I don't even like, I make pizza dough and, all kinds of stuff. I'm like, I don't even know why I was so scared, but I think this is a weird example, but I think like when you already had tried something and someone maybe told you that was not good enough,
Yeah.
or then that makes you even more resistant about trying it again later in your life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And to what was it, Sarah's point about, when you're young, the,
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I said, Sarah said.
I muted it. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why it keeps coming on.
Siri's very interested in this. Siri's like, I need a beginner's mindset, man, because she knows she's the expert, right? Poor Siri. It's a lot of burden she has. Anyway, we know, like from brain science, we know that when you're young, your brain is forming, right? So when a teacher, a parent, when something happens, traumatic, especially at a young age, our brain has what we call neuroplasticity. So it makes grooves, right? So just, think of the brain, it's bumpy, right? But there's like energy, there's connections that are happening. So the synapses that happen in the brain, and then what happens, somebody says that to you, and then you play that over and over and over and over and over in your mind, and you're forming that connection. And that's what happens, to us. And we, through things like mindfulness, and through, just understanding, being conscious of our thoughts, we can start saying, like I always say to people, like when those things come up, the first thing to ask yourself, is that true? And a lot of times, like, I'm a horrible baker. Well, I don't think that's true. Maybe you would be horrible, like, to do a very complicated, babka or something, like, but we're not going to send you to the tent, and be on, meet Paul, Paul, but but there, I'm sure if you had to make cookies, how to make brownies,
I can ruin those too.
I doubt it. I really do. But that's what happens, and then really we know from what happens in our brain how it manifests physically even. So, our thoughts, like there's been all these studies, like just with like hand strength, and they measured hand strength. People had to do an exercise, and then people just had to imagine them doing this hand exercise. And the people in the physical group, there was only an 8% difference in the change in hand strength. So they both increased their strength just by thinking about these
I like
hands.
that. That's how I would like to do my exercise. I'm going
I
to lose
know.
weight. Doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? Does it?
Hey, but do we do it? No. What's our thought about losing weight? We don't say, I feel good, I'm losing weight. No, we say, oh my gosh, my butt looks big, I feel fat. That's the thoughts we have. So maybe if we did do that, things would start shedding. I don't know. I haven't tried it myself.
Well, I
that's
think
where
there
my
is something
thoughts
really
go.
important about what you just said about, what you tell yourself. And
Absolutely.
I was reading this really interesting book. It's called Tiny Habits by, I think his name is Tom Fogg with a double G. And it's about how you create habits that you're actually able, we love to challenge ourselves, and or like say a diet, or I'm going to do this and I'm going to enforce this habit. And he says you need small steps, but one of the ways that he describes how you actually keep at it is by celebrating every time that you did it, celebrating yourself. So he gives a very weird example, right? He says every time he went to the loo, he said he's going to do 2 push-ups. Why that? It's like because he was not doing exercises, right? So he's like, okay, I'm gonna create a habit and make it easy for me, so that I know in my brain every time I go to the loo, I will do 2 push-ups. Okay, TMI, but whatever. If that works for you, Tom Fogg, whatever, great. But he said every time he did it, he also was like, whatever floats your boat of celebrating. Ever you look in the mirror and you say, I'm so cool, or wee-ha, or something. And he said doing that really made him crave this.
Yeah.
And what happened was he wouldn't forget the 2 push-ups, but he would also push himself literally to do more and more. And then it became from the small habit that he celebrated that he did that, he actually wired it in that he craved doing more and being happy about it. And I see Sarah just said, we do not celebrate our successes enough. Even small successes are worth acknowledging. And I think
Yeah.
that's huge, right?
And again, think about little kids. Little kids celebrate everything, right? Like, mom, look what I made. Mom, look what I did. They want you to go to the loo, say, mom, but that's, that's and that's because they're so everything is excitement, everything is wonder, everything is an adventure. And that is part of this beginner's mindset. Absolutely. I mean, when in my coaching, I do this with people all the time because they want, they have a vision, which is great. They have this goal that they want to achieve. But like, just taking exercise for an example, if if you haven't done any exercise for a month and then you say you're going to go to the gym, 5 times this week, well, just do it once and celebrate that. And then probably when you do it once, you'll say, I should really go again because this was good, but we have to celebrate. We have to, because like we have like chemistry going on all the time in our body. And when we do these things and we celebrate it, then we have all these good hormones, that fire, and we feel better. I mean, that's really so true. And again, we lose that, as we get older because the prevailing thoughts are probably more negative than the celebratory thoughts, right? So when we change that, this, things, and it's like, I love it because it's like a lot of this stuff sometimes, like you hear Zen Buddhism and it's a lot, like, oh, woo woo, like, what is she going to talk about today? But there's so much science and so much chemistry that validates all of this that I just love. I mean, I find that, I just love it when the two mesh, and the two validate and they just combine, and it's just so cool. But like I was telling you, like I found this article this week in Inc. magazine, and in fact I got to pull it up because this is new to me, but it's called the 70-20-10 rule. And they were talking about how it was about pottery, but this was, again, it's an Inc. magazine. I think Kim's going to put the link up there. But they were saying that 70% of your attempts will be mediocre, 20% will suck, and that's in the article I'm quoting, and 10% will be amazing. So this was in this like whole creation standpoint. So they had this study with potters, and they said, okay, this group is going to focus on quality. So you're going to create a quality product. And you guys are going to do as many as you can. And it turned out, like when they measured like thickness and all this, like how the pot was supposed to be, the people that did the many, so they did the 70% to just get through the mediocre, and then they found that 10% that was amazing. So I thought that was really, really interesting how that 70-20-10, and there's a whole bunch of studies that have been done on that. So I thought that was just really cool. And a lot of times, like how many times do you try, especially something with art, you try something new and you say, like even like a new product, and you say, you try it and you're like, the pen, it's just like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And you gave it, what did you try for, 20 minutes, and you just say, I don't like it. And maybe that's the pen that's going to open things up for your art,
Yeah, I think there's this whole like studying about quantity over quality. And that was the pottery, the example with the pottery too. They always mix it up. I think it's actually from a photographer, but whatever. The saying is that if you just set out for quantity, like, you do a lot of the same thing that you're trying, then later the quality will actually be better than when you set out to just go for quality right away.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you're, I saw someone said she's practicing the Native American flute, if I saw that right, right. So I tried to learn ukulele. I'm still playing, but if I would be like, I want to play right away perfectly this song, that's not gonna work. But if I just do a lot of playing,
Yep.
plinka, 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 plinka around all the time, at some point, actually, my quality gets better if
Yep.
I really practice and I do it more, and I'm not, oh, that wasn't perfect, I'm gonna start from the start again, right?
Yep.
Like, so I think it's really important to just do a lot. I have writers friends that are saying, and actually that is true for everything creative. I think it's like, you got to show up every day.
Yep.
There's no like lightning bolt that comes and you're like, no, I'm gonna do something amazing. That doesn't really work. It's a job. If you're a full-time artist, you show up at, I show up at 9 and I do my thing. And as you said, 70% of it is kind of like, yeah, but you're going for the quantity, and in there comes this gold nugget.
Yep.
And that's what you're like working for, and that's what makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
So
I know, like, I had a writing teacher that did that with, like, when you're trying to find that perfect word, and so your brain will go to, oh, this word will be good. But usually if you go down and you, like, I forgot how many she said, but now I'm really curious to go back to find that exercise, because maybe that fits in this 7-20-10 rule. But like, it's amazing how you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, you peel the onion, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh wow, here's that, and where I thought the first word that I came up with, that one was good, but then when you go deeper, that's when you find the gem. Yeah, it's just but we sometimes we stop ourselves because that we get into that judgy mode. And
so sorry.
No, go.
So for that article, actually, what I just found this morning was another article, and those pottery people, I mean, they're really onto something.
Yes.
It was actually about how pottery people, there is an Instagram feed that they use. It's called Ceramic Casualties. And those potterers, they are experimenting. And because you're experimenting, but also you work a long time on something, then you put it in the kiln and it shatters. It just doesn't work out. Like, you have tried something new and you have put all this work in there and just doesn't work. And they post and hashtag this account, ceramic casualties, and say, failure is an indicator that you move forward. Like, you look at this and you celebrate that you actually failed because you've tried it.
Yeah.
You celebrate that you tried it and that it failed. And then you go back and you think, okay, what did go wrong? What happened? And how can I fix it?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. I use when I do a lot of business, I work with a lot of businesses, and the guy in Shark Tank, Damon John, he says, I don't fail, I get data. And I thought that's really good, right? Because you do, like, when you fail, you say, all of these negative thoughts can come, and they do, and we just have to, again, be conscious that, okay, yep, okay, inner critic went nuts, and then you say, okay, but what did I learn from this? And the potters, my goodness, what they learn, they say, okay, you know what, that bottom was too thin, or my walls were too thick, so it couldn't, withstand, or they put in the wrong, you know, the glaze, made it so that, these two reacted in the kiln and it exploded. I mean, it's fascinating. And, yeah, potters are, I mean, it is such an art of faith, because they make this and they put it in there, and just have no idea until the kiln's done. You don't know how it's going to turn out.
I think that's why I think what's so wonderful about that, and I think that's part of my journey too, is that I embrace the journey. I
Yeah.
embrace the process. So for me, it's not so much about the outcome. I mean, am I happy if a painting that I do is like, wonderful and people want to hang it? Yes, that's the ultimate goal, right? But I enjoy the journey too, like
Mhm.
with the failures. I mean, plus not always. Don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect. So, but like and I think that is almost more important to me sometimes than the outcome. Like, and
Mhm.
I enjoy playing the ukulele with my friends while we're practicing, and we sound like, I don't know, cats on a roof on a hot summer night. But I enjoy the process playing with those guys and having our music teacher making fun, not of us, of course, then we wouldn't go to him anymore, but I think a little bit of us, because he likes us. So pre-pandemic, I like the process of learning this instrument with my friends, or I
Yeah.
like the process of learning something new and being excited about that, something that's working,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And that's, getting back to Zen Buddhism. I mean, that's a huge, another principle, is that, we have to enjoy the journey. Like, the journey is the most important part. It's not the end. It's the journey, because when we're stuck at the end, when we're stuck at, we want results, then we just go, we're not satisfied. But what if that fork in the road, there was something, 20 times better, but we were stuck on the result, not the journey, right? And that was a huge concept for me to get through the years, because I was just like, no, I want this goal, but that, when you're more attached to the journey, there's where you find the joy, really.
Very cool. I can't believe we're like so like it's already, the time really flies, but I want to see, does anyone have questions for ours, that you're like, okay guys, that was great, but how do you do this or that? Let me see. Anne says, fear of failure is the enemy. That is so true. We never stop learning. um, Cherry says, my upbringing said to expect loss of myself. I had to learn that I have to push myself, find the right word per se, push myself, and know I'm capable of more to believe I can. Surrounding oneself with those like minds really helps. That's true. I mean, sometimes it's hard to, actually, Bill Auld, is there any connection here? I'm just kidding.
Maybe.
Oh. Bill says sometimes we give too much credit to the naysayers who judge us and then shut down. That's true. I think there are people that are caring for us, right? Most of the times, it's not like a naysayer is per se someone who wants to be an evil person, and be in your way. But I think it's okay to question the naysayer as well, who
Yeah.
questions you,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
that that reminds me, Gabriela says, that reminds me of Samuel Beckett's quote, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. Very good quote. I love that.
Absolutely. And the Zen Buddhists say, fall 7 times, get up 8.
Exactly.
Right.
Mary Jo Ecker just posted a question, and she said, name, please, of the Zen's beginner's mind philosophers. Can
I'll type it in there because
yeah,
I'll say it, but you probably will may not be able to find it. I'll type it in.
okay. She's typing it in, and while she's typing it in, I will say it out loud too. Let me see what else we have while Karen is putting that in there. We have, Mary says fangs. What else do we have? Good enough is powerful, says Jen. And I'm finally okay to saying that. I love that. That is so true, right? Like, I mean, this striving for being outstanding or, perfectionism. If we really think about that rule that Karen said, 70, 30, 70, 20, 10, right? I mean, that's so hard. Like, we put so much pressure on ourselves. The beauty of failure, that's true. Let's see what else. Mixed media lends itself to going with the flow, no expectations. I agree, Sarah. Mixed media is a great art, thing to do. You know what I mean? So very cool. Karen is still typing.
Yeah, I realized I spelled his first name wrong, so I wanted to make sure.
Okay, and then you say it too.
It's Shun Ryu Suzuki.
I really enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you, Karen. Do you ever teach educators? It's a field that's often focused on outcomes.
Yeah. Yes, I've done a few webinars and things for educators. Gone to teacher conferences. In services for teachers.
Also, make sure that I hope you come back. I hope I enjoyed this a lot. We're going to have a new Spill Your Heart episode coming in April with Jimmy Leslie, Julie Pfeiffer-Balzer, and Iris Fritchie-Cousins. And we're going to talk about social media, and it's called Taming the Beast, which we already talked a little bit about today, but make sure that you come. Kim just put the registration link into the chat, but if you go to my website, you can also do that, or you will get a reminder through the newsletter. It's coming up on April 30th at noon, New York Times time. And if you want to learn something new, my mixed media people, check out our Beyond the Paper workshop. Karen, that was so delightful. That was like two things at once, spending time with my bestie and also talking about things that make me. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Karen.
Very fun. Thank you.
So Kim just posted her Facebook page too. So check her out. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.